The 357 Magnum and the 44 Magnum are easily two of the most popular cartridges chambered in lever-action rifles. But which one truly earns the top spot? To answer that fairly, we're going to put them head-to-head and break down their specs and performance. The goal here isn't hype, it's to help you figure out which round delivers the better deal for lever gun shooters. What's up, folks? Welcome back to Gun Fanatics. In this video, we're diving deep into the 357 Magnum and 44 Magnum to see how they stack up in real-world specs and downrange performance. If you're into no-nonsense gun content, hit that like button and subscribe. It goes a long way toward keeping this channel rolling. Now, let's get into it. Specifications breakdown. Let's kick things off with the basics. When it comes to heritage, the 357 Magnum is based on the 38 Special, while the 44 Magnum evolved from the 44 Smith & Wesson Special. Both cartridges are straight-walled with a rimmed case, design ideal for lever actions that rely on smooth feeding and strong extraction. Looking at measurements, the neck and base diameter for the 357 Magnum comes in at 0.379 inches. The 44 Magnum measures wider at 0.457 inches at both the neck and base. Rim diameter? The 357 sports a rim of 0.440 inches, while the 44 Magnum spreads out to 0.514 inches. Rim thickness for both is equal at 0.06 inches. Case length favors the 44 Magnum slightly at 1.61 inches, while the 357 sits just behind at 1.59 inches. When it comes to pressure, the 44 Magnum leads again, topping out at 36,000 pounds per square inch, compared to 35,000 pounds per square inch for the 357 Magnum. Case capacity is another area where the 44 shines, holding 37.9 grains of powder to the 357's 26.2 grains. Just from the numbers, it's clear. The 44 Magnum is packing more punch. It was once the king of handgun cartridges in terms of raw power, and while newer rounds have dethroned it, the legend still holds strong. That increased diameter gives it not just more propellant but also the ability to fire heavier, wider bullets. That adds up to deeper penetration and greater terminal energy on impact. Ballistics comparison. Now let's look at what these rounds do once they leave the barrel. There's a wide spectrum of available loads for both cartridges, so keep in mind we're working with representative data, not absolutes. The 357 Magnum is commonly offered in bullet weights ranging from 110 to 180 grains. The 44 Magnum spans an even heavier range, from 180 all the way up to 300 grains. Naturally, that difference in bullet weight affects muzzle velocity. Barrel length also plays a big role, especially in lever-action rifles, but to keep things consistent, let's compare two common factory loads from Hornady's custom line. The 357 Magnum with a 158-grain XTP projectile and the 44 Magnum with a 240-grain XTP. Out of the muzzle, the 357 pushes about 1,250 feet per second. The 44 clocks in higher at 1,350 feet per second. At 50 yards, the 357 holds around 1,149 feet per second, while the 44 maintains 1,230. Push that out to 100 yards, and the 357 drops to 1,072 feet per second versus the 44's 1,133. When it comes to ballistic coefficient, the 357's Hornady load sits at 0.206, while the 44's comes in at 0.205, nearly identical. Looking at bullet drop at 50 yards, the 357 drops about -2.67 inches, with the 44 falling a bit less at -2.3 inches. At 100 yards, the 357 experiences about -11.9 inches of drop compared to the 44's -10.35 inches. Energy at the muzzle tells the clearest story. The 357 delivers around 548 foot-pounds, while the 44 Magnum comes in stronger at 639 foot-pounds. That added power translates into greater stopping ability, particularly against larger game. Stopping power. When we're talking about raw stopping force, energy output plays a major role, and between these two cartridges, the 44 Magnum easily takes the lead. Even out at 100 yards, the sheer mass and diameter of the 44's projectile let it deliver more destructive energy to the target than what you'll get from a 357 Magnum round at the same range. But let's clear something up. Just because the 357 Magnum trails behind in terms of total energy doesn't mean it's some weak performer. Far from it. Anyone who dismisses this cartridge doesn't know what they're talking about. At close quarters, that 357 can still slam into its target with more than 500 foot-pounds of energy. In a self-defense scenario, that's well above what's typically considered necessary to stop a threat. Effectively lethal force is definitely on the table with that kind of impact. Now, the 44 Magnum also carries the edge in penetration. That's no surprise. It fires a bigger, heavier bullet. Heavier projectiles generally come with greater momentum and better sectional density, which refers to how well a bullet can push through barriers or tissue. However, in everyday practical use, the difference in penetration between these two rounds may not be all that obvious. You're only really going to notice it if you're going after big game or something like bear. That being said, the 44 Magnum's tendency to overpenetrate is something you should never ignore. In close-range defense situations, that much energy and penetration can become a liability, especially if there are bystanders in the area. Overpenetration could mean serious, unintended consequences. Recoil. Let's wrap things up by addressing recoil because it matters a lot when comparing the 357 Magnum and the 44 Magnum. Recoil isn't just about comfort. It affects how fast you can get back on target and fire follow-up shots. The more a gun jumps in your hand, the longer it takes to recover your aim. So, high recoil can absolutely wreck your shooting rhythm. Neither cartridge is what I'd call unmanageable, but there's a clear difference. The 44 Magnum definitely delivers a harder kick. The amount of recoil depends on a few things. How heavy your firearm is, the bullet's weight, how much powder is behind it, and how fast that bullet exits the barrel. Now, for the sake of example, let's assume you're loading 10 grains of powder behind the 357 Magnum and 15 grains behind the 44 Magnum. Let's also say you're running the 357 through a Ruger GP100 and the 44 through a Ruger Red Hawk, both solid revolvers. Using those setups, here's what we get. The 357 Magnum Hornady Custom with a 158 grain XTP bullet kicks back with about 7.77 foot-pounds of recoil. The American Eagle 357 Magnum with a 158 grain jacketed soft point delivers around 7.68 foot-pounds. The 44 Magnum Hornady Custom with a 240 grain XTP jumps up to about 14.96 foot-pounds. And the 44 Magnum American Eagle load with a 240 grain jacketed hollow point hits roughly 12.88 foot-pounds. That's a pretty big jump in recoil between the 44 and the 357, especially if you're shooting for extended sessions or relying on fast second shots in a defensive situation. Final thoughts. Even with the heavier power and stronger recoil of the 44 Magnum, the 357 Magnum continues to be the crowd favorite, and for good reason. It lets shooters run lighter, handier lever guns that are easier to control. It doesn't punish your shoulder, but it still delivers enough power to stop human threats cleanly. Meanwhile, if you're heading into the wild and might need to deal with bears or other big animals, the 44 Magnum is the round you want in your chamber. It's built for high-stakes encounters in bear country, and it's got the punch to back it up. If you enjoyed this comparison and want more no-nonsense breakdowns like it, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Thanks for watching. Stay sharp and stay safe out there.